morning, class. Good morning. So I know previously in our class we've seen different representations of data or graphs, but I want you guys to take a moment and really think about what are examples or what's the purpose of a graph? What's the purpose of a graph, or what is graphs used for? Jessica? That's right, that is right. Graphs are used as a diagram to show a relation between multiple different quantities or to show a relation between two or more things. A graph is never going to just represent one data point or one data set. You're trying to use a graph to represent data that you've collected or to compare with other data sets that you've obtained. So we're going to take a moment and I want you guys to look at this graph and let me know what are some things that you notice in this graph that you see in a lot of other graphs that we've talked about in class. So first, like Jessica said, she said a title. That's right, this graph definitely has a title like many other graphs. A proper graph will have a title because you need to know what you're comparing or what you're trying to focus on. If I took this title away, and our title for this graph is student's favorite color. If I took away this graph and I just had the colors labeled and the numbers labeled, what are we exactly measuring, or what are we comparing? This could be different color cars that have drove by your window, and I wouldn't know that we're comparing a group of people's favorite colors. So a title is very important. Also very important is our x-axis, which remember is your horizontal axis. Horizontal, remember the sun sets on the horizon, so that's this way, which give us our colors. And then we have our y-axis, remember vertical, which means up and down, like you jump, right? And the vertical, our y-axis on this one is representing the number of students. So if we look at this one, if we analyze, give me 1 second, class. Miss Allen is not prepared today. So if we analyze the different colors being represented, we would notice that pink is like the least and red is like the most, right? When we read a graph, we're going to read a graph from left to right in order to analyze data, just like we read. So if we look here, the interval for this graph is 5 units, okay? And it's 5 units because we start at 0 and every tick mark indicates another 5 units increasing. So we start at 0, we go to 5, then we go to 10, 15, and so on, right? Every interval for a graph will be different. Not every graph is going to increase at an interval of 5. It may increase by an interval of 1 or maybe 2. It all just depends on the size of your data set. Also, I want you guys to know that whenever you are looking at a graph, you can't automatically assume that we're going to start at 0. Okay, I know in this graph we start at 0, but that's because we have a small data set, okay? We only go up to 25, so we can show that in a very small graph. But if we had something that starts off, the minimum is 3 and goes all the way to 200, our minimum would be 3. We wouldn't have to start at 0. So I just want you guys to be aware of that when you're looking at graphs. Okay, now we're going to discuss, I'm going to show you guys some other examples, and we're going to kind of pay attention to how you would read other types of bar graphs, okay? So like I said in the other example, there's a few things that every graph needs in order to be a proper graph. For example, like we said, a title. So this title is Gadgets Owned by an 8th grade class. And then we're going to pay attention to our x-axis, and it's telling us the different types of gadgets. And then your y-axis is telling you the number of gadgets. So take a minute and look at this graph, and I want you guys to be able to tell me which gadget is least owned by this class and which one is the most owned. Now take a moment and pay attention to your interval, because I'm going to ask you guys in a moment what this graph is increasing at, and then we're going to discuss the different values of each gadget. Okay, Jessica, can you tell me what interval is this graph increasing at? You're right, it's increasing at an interval of 5. It resembles the last one, like I said, but we start at 0, and each tick mark, it goes up by 5. So we start at 0, 1 tick mark gives us 5, another tick mark gives us 2, so on and so on. Okay, and so we're going to start by reading this graph left to right, right? And so the first one that we're looking at is a calculator. Now, what's different about this graph is it's on a background of what? This resembles graph paper, right? I know we've used graph paper in the past, and a graph paper is just used to help you organize your data and keep it nice and neat, right? So, luckily for us, each tick mark lies on another blue line, okay? So when we're looking at calculator and we see that 25 lies on this blue line right here, and this value is given to us in a purple bar, so we can kind of notice the difference between them. And it kind of stops, if you take a moment and look, it stops a little bit above 25. Moments like this, they're not giving you an exact unit in between. They kind of leave you to guesstimate, right? So for instance, if we're looking between the interval of 25 and 30, which means it's bigger than 25, but it's not bigger than 30. And if we kind of look halfway, it's still not about halfway. So I would say it's about 26 people on a calculator, right? And then we're going to look over here to the next one. We have a cell phone, right, class? Okay, and so it's not quite, if you pay attention to the blue line, so it's not quite at 10, but it's definitely well over 5, right? So I would say this is about 9. So you have just a little bit more room, and then we would make it to 10. So I'd say about 9 people own a cell phone, right? So then we're going to look at another example. Now I know when you guys look at this one, it looks a lot different from the last 2 examples that we've looked at. But I want you guys to remember that it's the same. Just everything is just tilted the other way, right? Okay, so we talked about important things. Check for a title. We have a title. So that means that we're measuring with this data set the favorite graphs, right? Now, like I said, everything's the same. Now with your x-axis, what do we have here? We have numbers. So this must be the number of people that favor each type of graph. And on your y-axis, you just have your qualitative values. So the things that you're measuring quality-wise, really. So this would be your gadgets, or this would be your colors, if we were to discuss this in the previous 2 examples. So you read it the same way, class. This interval is going by 1, right? Because for every tick mark, you increase just 1. So we start at 0, we get to 1. Next tick mark, we get to 2. Next tick mark, we get to 3. So on and so on, right? So we're starting at 0. So we're going to read this graph from top to bottom, just like you would read a script, or that's not a good example. But anyway, we're going to start from top to bottom, right? Okay, so your first graph we have is a scatter graph. And if we just follow our bar over, similar to what we did in our other examples, we stop at tick mark 5, right? So that means that 5 people like scatter graphs. Take a moment and I want you to analyze the graph, and I want one person to tell me the least favorite graph and one person to tell me the most favorite graph. Sarah. You're right. Our frequency polygon here is the least favorite graph when we have only one person that chose this graph. And now, John, can you tell me the most favorite graph? You're right. It is our line graph. When we read our line graph, we follow our purple bar all the way to the end, and we get 9. 9 people favor a line graph, which is the most out of all of them, right? So now we're going to take a moment. I know you guys love when we play this game, but we're going to play one of these things are not like the others, okay? So I have 3 different types of graphs. Well, let me not say 3 different types. We have 3 different graph examples, and I want you to analyze and take a moment and discuss with your neighbors which one of these graphs does not belong in this group, and tell me why. Now, I chose them all to be different titles, or they're all measuring or comparing multiple different things, because I don't want you to focus on what exactly they're measuring, rather how they're representing it or how they're showing it, right? So for this one, we're measuring their favorite fruit. For this one, we're measuring your birthdays. And this one, we're measuring the average daily temperature, right? So take a minute, and I want you guys to tell me which one doesn't belong, and can you tell me why? Okay, so now that we had a minute, we're gonna start off with you, group.